A typical itinerary for a Baltic cruise is Stockholm, Helsinki, 2 days in St. Petersburg, Tallin, Aarhus in Denmark, Oslo, and Copenhagen. The approach to Stockholm, capital of Sweden, is usually made overnight, which is a shame because it's a beautiful cruise between the 25 to 30,000 islets which make up the Stockholm archipelago. Millions of years ago, the area was covered with ice. Erosion by weather and glaciers, together with cracking of the rocks, has led to the formation of the fjords separating the islets. Many of the islets are inhabited, so it's no surprise that 1 in 6 Swedes own a boat. That's more than own cars. Some islets have roads, and these are linked by a flotilla of car ferries. The narrowest point of the approach is guarded by an old gun emplacement. Because many of the fjords are very shallow, there are only 2 passages between Stockholm and the sea, but the one opposite is too small for the large cruise ships. The houses, which become denser the nearer one gets to Stockholm, were built by wealthy industrialists. Many of the original bathing huts are now boathouses. The best way to get to hospital from these islands is by air ambulance. Eventually, after 58 nautical miles, the ships tie up at the quayside just outside the city centre. The Riksdag, or Parliament building, stands on its own island, one of the 14 which make up this city, sometimes called the Venice of the North. The Gamla stan, or Old Town, is built on another single island. Winding cobblestone streets are lined with buildings dating from as early as the 16th century. Picturesque shops, churches, restaurants and art galleries line the streets. It's very pleasant to wander around the old quayside. From here, historic boats sail to Gothenburg through the Göta Canal on a 4 or 6 day one-way trip. Overlooking the quay is the 18th century 608-room royal palace. Although the royal family no longer live here, it's still used for state occasions. As with all royal palaces, there's a ceremonial guard. Those soldiers, like policemen, get younger by the day. In front of the palace is a fountain dedicated to King Oscar II. Alongside the palace is the Gothic church used for royal weddings, coronations and christenings. The palace courtyard is open to the public, as are some of the rooms. At 12 o'clock every day, crowds gather for the changing of the guard. On the opposite side of the palace, one comes back to the Parliament building. From the square between the two, carriages wait to take tourists around the city. In the evening, the ships sail back into the Baltic and across the Gulf of Finland to Helsinki. Helsinki is home to the Sibelius Park, where there's a large monument honouring the composer Sibelius. Made of stainless steel tubes, it's thought that it represents a birch tree. It wasn't universally popular in Finland, so a bust of the composer was added later. The city has lots of little harbours and marinas. 32 miles from Helsinki is Porvoo, the second oldest town in Finland. It received its charter in the middle of the 14th century and developed around the church and the river. It soon became an important trading centre, a role which it still fulfills today. The old town has several museums and art galleries, as well as lots of boutiques, craft shops, restaurants and cafes. A large farm just down the road provides meals for coach parties from the cruise ships. Of course, it also has a gift shop. Back in Helsinki, the large central Senate Square is lined with 19th century neoclassical buildings. It's also home to the Lutheran St. Nicholas Cathedral and the University of Helsinki. A short stroll down a side street leads to the market square, at the far end of which stands the Ouspensy Cathedral. Historic trams can be hired for private parties. After more marinas comes the church in the rock, which was designed by two architect brothers and completed in 1969. The innovative church is carved into bedrock. Only its graceful copper cupola, made of a spiral of narrow copper strips, rises above the curved rock walls. Ships dock in the new cruise terminal in St. Petersburg, and tours of the city, usually spread over 2 days, often start with an orientation boat ride on the numerous canals and rivers of the city. The Green Building is the last palace, so called because it was the last to be built before the Revolution. The canal bridges are very low. Out on the River Neva, the boat passes the world-famous Hermitage Museum, which we will see more of later. The twin rostral columns represent the 4 rivers of Russia. Old ships are moored on the riverside, the most famous of which is the cruiser Aurora, from where the blank shot which started the 1917 Russian Revolution was fired. Nearby stands St. Michael's Castle, built by Emperor Paul I, who was terrified of being assassinated. Ironically, he was killed by one of his own guards. Back on land, queues of people wait to be admitted to the Hermitage Museum. The Hermitage, formerly the Winter Palace, was the state residence of Russian emperors. The main palace was built between 1754 and 1762 for Empress Elizabeth, daughter of Peter the Great. Unfortunately, Elizabeth died just before completion, so its first resident was Catherine the Great, wife of Peter III, who was ousted in a coup involving Catherine, and died in a mysterious accident shortly after. Many of the palace's impressive interiors have been remodelled since then, particularly after 1837, when a huge fire destroyed most of the building. Today the Winter Palace, together with 4 more buildings arranged side by side along the river embankment, houses the extensive collections of the Hermitage. It's the biggest art gallery in Russia and one of the largest and most respected in the world. The museum was founded in 1764 when Catherine bought a collection of 255 paintings from Germany. It now boasts over 2.7 million exhibits and displays a diverse range of art and artifacts from all over the world and from all periods of history. It's said that if one spent just 1 minute looking at each exhibit on display, it would take 11 years to see them all. The collection includes paintings by artists such as Monet, Matisse, Gauguin, and even Leonardo da Vinci. On a quiet stretch of the Moika River stands the former residence of the wealthy Yusupov family. Visitors are led through the beautiful interiors of the palace. It even has its own private theatre. This is where the mad monk Rasputin was murdered in 1917. From here one can see the dome of St. Isaac's Cathedral. Completed in 1858, it was the largest cathedral in Russia. The facade is decorated with massive columns, each a single piece of red granite. Inside, the columns are made of malachite and lapis lazuli, and the interior, which can accommodate 14,000 people standing, is adorned with mosaic icons and paintings. In a completely different architectural style is the Cathedral of Our Saviour on the Spilled Blood. This is built in typical Russian Orthodox style, with many domes of different designs. It was built on the spot where Alexander II was assassinated in 1855 and was completed in 1907. The interior and exterior of the church are decorated with detailed mosaics covering an area of 7,000 square meters, created by the most prominent Russian artists of the day. The centre of each dome contains the picture of a face. On the other side of the Neva River is the St. Peter and St. Paul fortress. Crossing the courtyard, one enters the cathedral of the same name. It was built between 1712 and 1733. Both the cathedral and the fort were built under Peter the Great. The cathedral contains the tombs of almost all the emperors and empresses, from Peter the Great to Nicholas II. All are in white marble, except for those of Alexander II and his wife Maria. That of Peter the Great always has fresh flowers. Catherine the Great's tomb stands behind it. It's almost unheard of to have a pulpit in a Russian Orthodox church. The cathedral has the largest Orthodox bell tower in the world, and the gold spire is 404 feet high. As with all the cathedrals we've seen, it's not an active place of worship, but a museum. The Peterhof Palace, summer residence of Peter the Great, is situated 18 miles west of St. Petersburg. Visitors can walk through the divan room, throne room, ballroom, picture room, and Chesma Hall, which shows pictures of the Battle of Chesma. The grounds cover 300 acres. The lower gardens are designed in the French formal style of the 17th century, with trees, paths, flowers and fountains. The terrace is decorated with gold-plated fountains. It was built to rival Versailles in France, and Peter called it Mon Plaisir, meaning my pleasure. Peter had a wicked sense of humour. Some of the fountains were hidden beneath benches and in the trees, and designed to surprise and soak unwary guests. In those days many people powdered their wigs with flour, and the sight of aristocrats with thin dough running down their faces caused Peter great delight. One of the most notable designs is called the sun, where water jets create an image of the sun's rays. At 11 o'clock every morning the fountains are turned on to the sound of an extended fanfare. What a contrast to the Soviet-era housing for the common people. The fortified old town of Tallin can be clearly seen from the ship in the cruise port. A short stroll from the pier leads to the shuttle bus, which goes directly to the Viru gate. Once through the gate, one can see the town hall tower, which is visible throughout the town. In the arches beneath the walls, local ladies sell their homemade knitwear. St. Nicholas Orthodox Church stands on Veen Street, where the town's wealthiest residents used to live. Nearby, St. Catherine's Passage contains tombstones from an ancient monastery. There's another passing glimpse of the town hall down a side street, and a handcart selling nuts coated in honey and spices on the way to St. Nicholas Church, not to be confused with the Orthodox one. From this tower, soldiers could see into neighbouring houses, leading to the name Peak in the Kitchen. Town Hall Square was the heart of medieval Tallinn, though it only officially got its current name in 1923. It's used for town meetings, celebrations and receptions. The town hall was built between 1402 and 1404, and the spire rebuilt in 1960, having been destroyed by bombing in the Second World War. On the wall of the 14th century Church of the Holy Spirit is Tallinn's oldest public clock, dating from the 17th century. For years it was believed that a horrible spirit dwelled at the bottom of this well. It was said that the spirit would flood the city if an occasional sacrifice in the form of a cat were not dropped into the well. Tallinn is divided into upper and lower towns, with a gate between to keep the riff-raff of the lower town out at night. Near to the gate is the Danish King's Garden. There's a walk on top of the walls. The Alexander Nevsky Cathedral is Tallinn's largest and grandest Orthodox cupola cathedral, and was built in the Russian Revival style between 1894 and 1900. It's been meticulously restored since Estonia regained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. Opposite stands Tampere Castle, the seat of the Estonian Parliament. The whole upper town is known as Tampere. Also in Tampere stands the Cathedral of St. Mary the Virgin, otherwise known as the Dome Church. Originally established by Danes in the 13th century, it was the only building to survive a fire on Tampere in the 17th century. From the nearby viewpoint there are magnificent panoramas over the lower town. Of the original 45 defensive towers, 26 still remain, along with 1.5 kilometres of wall. Near the Great Coast Gate is the steeple of the 12th century St. Olav's Church, once the highest building in the world. The 82-foot diameter Fat Margaret's Tower stands just outside the Great Coastal Gate, one of 6 medieval gates, which leads out into the modern city. Back at the cruise terminal, stallholders in the bustling market try to relieve passengers of their last remaining euros before they board the ships to sail into the sunset. Aarhus on the Jutland Peninsula is Denmark's second city and largest port. One excursion goes to Bryrup by coach to take a restored steam train for a half-hour ride along the line once described as the most beautiful railroad in Denmark. The train travels down a glacial valley, which is home to dense forest. It features original carriages and is drawn by a locomotive built in 1949. From the end of the line, coaches go on to the Silkeborg Museum. When the body of Tallin man was discovered in a peat bog in the 1950s, police thought they had a murder on their hands. It turned out that the corpse was 2,300 years old and is now displayed in this museum. The body is a reproduction, but the hands and head are the real thing. The bog preserved them so well that you can still see the bristles of his beard. The tour ends at Sky Mountain, one of the highest elevations in all of Denmark, at an ear-popping 500 feet above sea level. It was here that the first public meeting was held, which led to democracy in Denmark. On the top of the hill is a 25-metre tower dedicated to King Frederick VII and his role in giving the people a constitution in 1849. There's also the usual collection of souvenir stalls. Next port is Oslo, a major highlight of which is the Vigeland Park, the largest sculpture park in the world to be created by a single artist. The park covers 80 acres and was designed by Norwegian sculptor Gustav Vigeland, who created over 200 stone, iron and bronze statues. The sculptures depict the complete human life cycle from birth to death. An unusual feature is that visitors are allowed, or even encouraged, to climb all over the statues. Virtually all tours of Oslo go to Holmenkollen, the cradle of ski jumping and the site of the 1952 Olympic ski jump. The less foolhardy can enjoy the experience from the safety of the simulator. In a forest setting on the edge of Oslo, the open-air folk museum features historic and traditional Norwegian buildings from all over the country. They've been reassembled and fully furnished. Roofs were often waterproofed with birch bark overlaid with turf. Here there's even a school complete with teacher and desks. The star of the show is the 13th century Gauls stave church from the Hallingdal region. The Norwegian Royal Yacht is moored near the cruise terminal. Cruises finish at Copenhagen, where, if there's time before the flight home, one can have a city tour. The Gefjon fountain stands on the waterfront and features a number of animals drawing a chariot driven by the Norse goddess Gefjon. Near the fountain is the English church. There's also a statue of the King of Denmark. Also on the waterfront is the Danish Royal Yacht. The Amalienborg Palace is the winter home of the Danish royal family. It consists of 4 identical buildings set round an octagonal courtyard. This one is where the Crown Prince lives. Although there's a palace guard, the whole area is open to the public, some of whom have found a way of getting round that is less hard on the feet. There's an attractive canal area lined with brightly coloured buildings, many of which are used as bars and restaurants, as are some of the boats. In another part of the waterfront, close to a marina, is a small statue which is the icon of Copenhagen, the Little Mermaid, a central figure in one of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. The statue is only 1¼ meters high, but nonetheless a major tourist attraction.